basically we have accounts today with commercial banks. Those commercial banks have accounts with larger commercial banks, or if you're with one of the big banks, right, Wells Fargo, BOA, JPM, they have accounts directly with the Federal Reserve. So it's an intermediated system today. A CBDC would be every individual is going to be on the central bank's database. So they'll see every transaction. This is a precursor to a Chinese social credit scoring system, basically. So in China today, you say the wrong thing. First you might get shamed on the local neighborhood billboard. You keep it up or your score gets too low. They might turn off your funds, ability. You can't spend your money on travel, for instance, and you keep it up. They might take away your ability to buy food. I don't know how far it goes, but
yeah, I mean, it's literally a Black Mirror episode.
It's Black Mirror episode, and it's an obvious and necessary tool for social engineering.
So again, I'm just trying to do the 101 thing here. Someone is watching this going, but what the hell is it? What is it?
Yeah.
That's what I really want to drill down on here. What is it?
I think the best analogy, and this is how we describe things that are new that we can hardly understand, is by way of metaphor or analogy.
Sure.
Bitcoin has several, right? One,
I should say, I get it to the extent that I have Bitcoin and I've traded some Bitcoin. And the reason I've actually never, you'll love this, I've never spent a cent on Bitcoin. When I started my show about 10 years ago, I just someone said to me, put up a Bitcoin wallet there, put up the address on your site, and people sent us a bunch of Bitcoin when it was worth nothing at the time. So I have a nice amount of Bitcoin right now. But even that, I have my wallet, I have my ledger, I got all the numbers and the passwords and all of that stuff. But there's a whole bunch of people that have it and actually still don't really understand what it is or what to do with it or how it's a storage of value rather than something that you're constantly exchanging, etc.
Yeah. So you're holding.
Yeah, I'm holding.
You're holding. Yeah. Well, that's what you're supposed to do with it, as far as I can tell. So the metaphors for Bitcoin, one that I think is useful, the internet of money. So what is the internet? The internet is a stack of open source protocols for moving information without asking anyone's permission, right? You can just create a website and publish things. Now, obviously, this has become a little more contentious at the application layer, right? Like if you're trying to publish stuff on Instagram or Facebook or certain websites, YouTube, they will censor you, but they're not censoring you at the, HTTP layer or SMTP layer. These are layers that are, more open, they're open source software, basically. Bitcoin is open source software, or you could actually consider it as the latest layer of the internet protocol stack. Again, I mentioned a couple, HTTP, SMTP, BTC would be another one, but instead of just moving information, you're actually able to move economic value without permission. And unlike the application layer, Bitcoin's not a company, so there's no headquarters, no CEO, there's no Mark Zuckerberg that's going to censor you for sending the wrong Bitcoin transaction.
It's completely decentralized.
Decentralized, exactly. So it's an internet protocol infused with money. So it's like if the internet and gold had a baby, that is Bitcoin. That's one sort of good analogy. And then another good one is digital gold. And I think that's useful because it points you to what is gold? Why did gold become money? And that gets you into the properties of good money. And you can see, this is what made gold good. It was divisible, durable, recognizable, portable, and scarce. And then if you evaluate Bitcoin through the same criteria, you see that it basically outperforms gold an order of magnitude in all of those properties of money. So those are a couple of good ones. It's open source software, it's money. You could also say it's a social institution or a decentralized organization. I mean, there's no one that works at Bitcoin, but there are millions of people that work for Bitcoin, right? Everyone that's mining Bitcoin, all the entrepreneurs that are building on it, developers that are writing the software and updating it, people that are holding it. Like technically you are participating. The fact that you haven't spent your Bitcoin, you are contributing to the monetization of Bitcoin. Because you have Bitcoin that you're not selling, you're holding it. So you have supply that's been taken off the market, and the more demand is against the supply that's taken off the market, well, that's what drives the price up. So you're actually contributing to Bitcoin's price growth and monetization by not spending it.
And it's going up. So
it's going up.
So I'm doing what I can.
So you're part of the Bitcoin network.
You mentioned that you're a Bitcoin maximalist or a freedom maximalist. So what does that make of your feelings about the other coins in general?
Yeah, in a nutshell, it all comes down to that operative word of decentralization. Like I said, I was running a hedge fund that dabbled in a lot of these crypto assets or cryptocurrencies, and I wrote valuation reports on a lot of them, studied them deeply, and basically none of them are decentralized. There is a group or an individual, even in some cases, that controls the rules or the supply or the consensus mechanism for those assets. So whereas Bitcoin has this, and even Bitcoin starts out as centralized, by the way, right? Like one guy, Satoshi Nakamoto, releases it into the world, but then it goes through this organic kind of idiosyncratic path of development that causes it to become decentralized. And there have been attacks on Bitcoin. You could read a book like The Block Size Wars of 2017, where a very influential group and well-heeled group of people tried to take control of Bitcoin, basically to change the block size to make it less decentralized, and that attack was resisted. So Bitcoin kind of has this.
How could you take it? I mean, that might be a little technical for the audience, but how would you take control of something that's decentralized?
Well, so here's the thing: and this is where it's kind of difficult to understand. Bitcoin has this protocol layer, which is like the internet. It is the technology layer, if you will, right? The hardware and software. But there's also a social layer on top of it, which again you're participating in, right? Just by being a holder. And so at the social layer, Bitcoiners are able to run what's called a software node. And so they're actually, the analogy here is like, think about choosing the language that you want to speak in. Or if you consider Bitcoin to be a game, it's like choosing the rules of chess you want to play by. And the point of consensus between those nodes is Bitcoin, basically. So the nodes are selecting the rules that they want to abide by. And then the protocol layer is enforcing those rules. This is the miners and the hardware and the software. They're enforcing the rules selected by the nodes. So it's a little bit technical, but it's kind of like a pure economic democracy. And so in the block size war, they try to hijack the social layer. They were trying to campaign and say, hey, people, we need bigger blocks. They were saying it was for more transaction throughput. What the reality is, it appeared to be that they were trying to compromise the decentralization of Bitcoin such that it would be less resistant to state attacks.
So are you using Bitcoin sort of the way I'm using it now, and that you just use it as a storage of value? So you're not doing a lot of commerce on Bitcoin, which is still a little bit complex, right? Not complex, but it's costly in essence.
It can be costly. It depends what the fees are. It's supply and demand driven. It's not too complex, actually. If you can send an email, I think you can send a Bitcoin transaction. You're really just copying and pasting an address. The custody component can be a little more complex, especially when you're custodying large amounts of value. You want to have, like, I always recommend a multi-key solution or collaborative custody so that you don't have a single point of failure. You have redundancy, basically. Right. However, I'm using it, just sort of the tried and true way of, I try to earn more than I spend in all of my businesses, try to run profitable businesses, and then I stash the savings in Bitcoin. I do pay some of my employees in Bitcoin that want to be paid in Bitcoin. So that's really the only exception, but I'm a net buyer of Bitcoin every day.
So you mentioned central bank digital currencies. This, in essence, would be what you're describing as sort of the people that have either screwed this up or how a system got screwed up, pushing out their own version of this, right?
Yeah, but not decentralized.
But not decentralized,
basically, yeah.
So it's central bank digital.
Yes.
So it's got people confused because it sounds like it's sort of going to be free digital, free in that sense, but not centralized.
Yeah, it will be, basically we have accounts today with commercial banks. Those commercial banks have accounts with larger commercial banks, or if you're with one of the big banks, right, Wells Fargo, BOA, JPM, they have accounts directly with the Federal Reserve. So it's an intermediated system today. A CBDC would be every individual is going to be on the central bank's database. So they'll see every transaction. This is a precursor to a Chinese social credit scoring system, basically. So in China today, you say the wrong thing. First you might get shamed on the local neighborhood billboard. You keep it up or your score gets too low. They might turn off your funds ability. You can't spend your money on travel, for instance, and you keep it up. They might take away your ability to buy food. I don't know how far it goes, but
yeah, I mean, it's literally a Black Mirror episode.
It's Black Mirror episode, and it's an obvious and necessary tool for social engineering, right? Like we saw with the Canadian truck protesters in Canada, they couldn't stop the protests, so what did they do? They froze their bank accounts, and they froze the contributors' bank accounts. So,
do you see it in that will be inevitable in the West, that's coming no matter what? So Bitcoin is in essence your hedge against that.
I think so. I mean, when I look at the state, I see it's a monopoly, right? The monopoly on violence. It oversees a tax farm, and it wants to grow its revenues like any other business in the world. So one of the main aims of the state, and this is from the book Seeing Like a State, he said that the state tries to make taxpayers legible. So it wants to know who you are, who you interact with, what your economic situation is, your inflows, your outflows, et cetera. Everything you put on a tax return, right? That's what the state wants to know. They want to make taxpayers as legible as possible so they can tax them as efficiently as possible. And it's kind of a balancing act, right? If you overtax a population, well, they might leave, or you're just going to kill productivity or so drastically lower the incentives to be productive, then there won't be anything to tax. So it's kind of a parasitic relationship in that way. And a CBDC makes taxpayers hyper legible to the state. You can literally see every financial transaction down to the penny, what they're doing, who it went to. Forget reporting your $601 Venmo transaction via 1099. Like they'll just see it on the screen, right? And then you layer on the AI tools, machine learning, deep learning, all of this, and how that could manage people or socially engineer people. And I think the Chinese governmental model is being exported to the West, and a CBDC is a keystone to that operation.
If you're looking for an unfiltered lens into the world of tomorrow, check out our tech playlist. And if you want to watch full interviews on a variety of topics, watch our full episode playlist, all right over here. And to get notified of all future videos, be sure to subscribe and click the notification bell.